What's good, people? I'm back, and the photo on my screen right now, the photo that you guys are seeing right now is not AI. This is a completely real picture. Yes, Justin Gaethje has beat Ilia Topuria. It's been over a week. It's been a little over a week since this happened, and I really haven't quite moved on from it yet. This has to be okay. Let me clear this up real quick. This is the greatest underdog win in the history of the sport. I don't care. I don't care about Matsura versus GSP. Maybe you could make an argument for Sean Strickland versus Israel Adesanya, but looking at that fight in hindsight and everything going into that fight, maybe there were some questions about Izzy being such a huge favorite. But in this fight, there was no way, at least for Sean Strickland, in hindsight, you can kind of see why he got beat. But even after the fight has happened, I can't still really process why Justin Gaethje was able to beat Ilia Topuria so badly. I mean, yeah, we know why he able to beat it. We know why he was able to beat him so badly, but it's kind of hard to even look in hindsight and be like, oh yeah, it was so obvious. Nobody can say that. As for Matsura versus GSP, that was a fluke. Back then, the sport hadn't developed as much. You would never see those odds in a title fight now. You would never ever see those odds in a title fight now, even if the fighter is taking the fight on short notice. For example, Sean Strickland. So you would never see such big odds. So yeah, the sport was just at a different time. It was a fluke. So I don't care. Justin Gaethje just did the most massive upset in UFC history. And it got me thinking, and it got a lot of people thinking, that is 2026 the year of the underdogs? So is 2026 really the year of the underdogs? I did some digging, I did some research, I did some thinking, and I think I might have an answer to this question. Now let's start with why this claim is kind of popping up right now. And it's not really 2026, it's been happening since December of 2025. But we'll consider it mostly for 2026. So let's go over some of the notable wins of underdogs in 2026. Starting off the year, we had Justin Gaethje versus Paddy Pimblett as a main event, as a title fight of UFC 324. Justin Gaethje beat Paddy Pimblett while being an underdog, which, in hindsight was kind of obvious. Not in hindsight, I picked Justin Gaethje. I was telling you guys Paddy Pimblett is horrible and he's not gonna go in there with the right game plan. He never does. This guy was getting fucking taken down by Michael Chandler, dude. The reason he was able to secure a good position over Chandler was because Chandler fucked up. Well, anyways, let's move on from that fight. The second fight, I'm talking about title fights here only. The second title fight that happened here was Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez. Volkanovski was the favorite and he obviously won that one. But it was a rematch and whatever. The third title fight, I don't know if we should count it, but it was the BMF title fight between Charles Oliveira and Max Holloway. Charles Oliveira was a moderate underdog going into it. Max Holloway was a moderate favorite going into it. Charles Oliveira obviously beat him. You could maybe, yeah, it was a bit boring and whatever. But at the end of the day, Charles Oliveira won as the underdog. The next title fight that happened was Yuri Prohaska versus Carlos Frodberg. And in that fight, the odds were even. But if you look at topology, most people picked Yuri Prohaska, and that is going to be my way of kind of deciding who the underdog is in that fight, and it's gonna happen over and over again. So I'll come to that in a minute after I talk about these wins. So most people picked Yuri Prohaska. Carlos Frodberg won with a broken foot, with a broken leg at that. Then the next title fight that happened was Joshua Van versus Tatsuro Taira. Tatsuro Taira was the favorite going into the fight. Joshua Van obviously beat him and I have not been the same ever since. The next fight that happened was one of the most notable underdog wins this year was Sean Strickland versus Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat Chimaev was like a very huge favorite. Sean Strickland was being overlooked. Sean Strickland beat him. Yeah, it was a close decision, but I think it was obvious that Sean Strickland won that fight. The next title fight that happened was Cyril Gane versus Alex Pereira for the interim title. Alex Pereira and Cyril Gane, it was at even odds, but most people picked Alex Pereira. And before, at Closing odds, it was even, but before the fight, like a couple days before, Alex Pereira was a small favorite. As we got closer to the fight, it became even odds. Then the next fight that happened was the biggest upset of the year, the biggest upset in UFC history, in my opinion. Justin Gaethje beating Ilia Topuria for the undisputed lightweight belt. And yeah, these are all the title fights that happened this year, and only one favorite has won yet. Only one singular favorite. And the next title fight that is going to happen is Mackenzie Dern versus Gillian Robertson, which I'm not going to talk about that. I have no idea about that fight and who wins that or whatever. But it is a winnable fight for both of these. Very winnable. So the underdog could win in that one. But the next fight that is confirmed is Islam Makhachev versus Ian Gary. And Ian Gary has a very good chance at beating Islam Makhachev. And he is going to be the underdog. We all know this. So there's clearly a trend. There's clearly a pattern. Since February, not a single fighter has won a title fight being the favorite. So is it really the case that underdogs are winning this year? So I did some research. I crunched some numbers. I did some stuff. So I have went back and I have basically made collected statistics from the past 2 years and this year. So I've did 2024, 2025 and 2026. So first let me explain what I'm doing here. I've compiled the winners of main events and title fights. So fight night main events and title fight winners, whether it be co-main event or whatever. And I will be including BMF title fights in this one as well. So in 2024, overall in main events and title fights, 64.6% of favorites won, meaning 35.4% of underdogs won in main events and title fights. As for only title fights, 60% of favorites won in title fights, and 67.8% of favorites won in fight night main events. As for 2025, overall, 63.3% of favorites won, 36.7% of underdogs won in main events and title fights. As for title fights, 65% of favorites won in title fights and 62.1% of favorites won in fight night main events. Now let's talk about 2026. Let's start off with the title fights first. There have been 7 title fights and 6 underdogs have won, meaning in title fights, underdogs have won 85.7% of the fights. In fight night main events, it's the favorites are winning most fights, but it is very close. 53.8% of favorites. This is an old statistic. Sorry, cancel that out. Forget about that. 57.2% of favorites have won in fight night main events, which is still pretty close. But it is getting closer to that 60%-ish number, which is usually 60 to 65% of favorites win in title fights and main events. So it is getting closer to that, but it is still considerably less. As for overall in fight night main events and title fights, 42.8% of favorites have won and 57.2% of underdogs have won. So it's clearly more underdogs have won this year in title fights and main events. The reason I'm considering title fights and main events is because I really didn't want to go and look up every single odds, all the fucking statistics, all of the fucking fights. And also the only fights that matter are the main events and title fights, when you're talking about massive upsets and whatever, right? We are talking about actually noticeable underdog wins. Now, that being said, what was the criteria for this? Obviously, I looked at the odds. If you were the favorite, you were the favorite. If you were the underdog, you were the underdog. Now, at even odds, I went to topology. I looked at the percentage of people picking a fighter, and if it was at even odds, that fighter that the people picked the most, that more people picked, would be the favorite. That's how we got the criteria. So now we have established that more underdogs are winning this year. And what could be the possible reasoning behind this? Now, the statistics themselves are crazy already, and I think they're going to remain pretty crazy moving on forward, going forward. But if you consider December as well, in December, one of the big two upsets happened in title fights. Joshua Van beat Pantoja, beat in quotation marks, and Pure Yan just absolutely destroyed Mirab. 50-45 him, dominated him, put a performance of a lifetime on Mirab as a massive underdog, losing the first fight between them. So why is this happening? Why, since December, have massive favorites in main events and title fights? Why have they been losing? Now, I have an idea as to why this might be happening. In recent years, in recent memory, we haven't seen skill-based champions as much. Skill-based champions as much. Now, you might be wondering what that even means. What I'm talking about is a lot of fighters in recent years have been depending on physicality. A lot of top-level fighters have been depending on physicality. Let's go over them really quickly. Merab Dvalishvili. He relies on his cardio. His technique isn't that good. He doesn't have good jiu-jitsu. His wrestling is really good, but his wrestling still has holes in it as it was exposed by Pure Rian. His wrestling is definitely the best, but it's definitely not as high level as somebody like Khamzat. He relies on his cardio, he relies on his pace, he relies on his chin. So, physicality factors. At featherweight, we had Volkanovski, which, whatever, but before that we had Ilya Topuria, who was the lightweight champion as well. Why did Ilya Topuria lose? He relies on his physicality. Ilya Topuria, I've said this before. I said it before the Oliveira fight, by the way, while I was breaking him down for the Oliveira fight, that he doesn't have good striking defense. He's never needed to have good striking defense because he relies on his physicality. He has a lot of power and people respect his power a lot. And he's never really had to face adversity. And he's never really had to face a power puncher in front of him. Yeah, the best power puncher he ever faced before Justin Gaethje was Josh Emmett. And yeah, Charles Oliveira has power in his hands, but Charles Oliveira is also slow. Charles Oliveira's striking defense is also awful. Charles Oliveira's striking offense is also not as good as Justin Gaethje. Then another fighter we have, Islam Makhachev. Now I understand. Islam Makhachev has a lot more, is definitely a person who has more skills than physical attributes, who relies more on his skills than physical attributes. But you look at that Jack Della Maddalena fight. Islam is fucking strong. He relies on his strength a lot. And we might be seeing, he relies on his girth a lot, and we might see the end of Islam Makhachev pretty soon as well. We look at middleweight. We'll talk about Khamzat in a minute, but let's talk about Dricus du Plessis. Dricus du Plessis suffers from the same thing Khamzat suffers with. He's big and strong. Nobody can really take him down. And even when people do take him down, he just gets back up. He's never had to develop high-level wrestling defense, high-level defensive grappling, because he doesn't have to. Nobody can really take him down. People, when they take him down, they can't really hold him there. He never really had to before facing Khamzat because he relied on his physicality. The same with Khamzat. His cardio was ass. He fights at a very high pace. He never had to develop any other skills except for grappling because he relies on his physicality. And Khamzat is a special case because his physicality, unlike other fighters, where their physicality is a double-edged sword in a sense that because they rely on their physicality, their skills aren't developed enough. Khamzat is kind of a double-edged sword in an even worse way because not only are his skills not developed enough, his physicality also makes him gas out. We look at light heavyweight, Alex Pereira. He relies on his power. He relies on his power a lot. You see a lot of these power punchers, they don't really develop as good striking defense. What happened to Pereira? You look at Tom Aspinall. Even he relies a lot on his speed and power, where he can beat a lot of these ploddy heavyweights using that. I do understand Tom Aspinall skill-wise is also very good, but you look at somebody closer to his skill level like Gane, and you see that because of relying on his physicality for so long, we can see the clear difference between him and Gan. So we have kind of established that in recent years, fighters with a lot of physical advantages, fighters who rely on their physicality a lot, have been winning fights, have been at the highest level of the sport. And that is one reason as to why so many fighters are getting exposed now. Because when you rely on your physicality a lot, you do not develop good basics. And after a certain point, fighters with good basics like Justin Gaethje, he has had so much time to develop his basics. And there's also another point. Now, my second point is that they have been figured out. Game planning has become such an important part of the sport nowadays, and it's so important and everybody does it so well. Ilia Topuria, he was figured out. He was running into the jab, and he was kind of figured out before the Oliveira fight, because if you look at my breakdown, I don't have a breakdown before the Oliveira fight. But I would say if you look at Che's breakdown, he breaks down really well. Somebody with good striking defense and good striking offense can really take advantage of Ilia's striking defense deficiencies. And if Ilia strikes at a boxing range, you can just clinch up with him. And that's what Justin Gaethje did. He fought outside, he used his jab, and when Ilia would move inwards, he would clinch up and throw uppercut. So he was kind of figured out. It's happening. It's gonna happen that after a certain point, these fighters are gonna be figured out. Merab Dvalishvili, he was figured out by Petr Yan. Khamzat Chimaev, these fighters, they show a lot of cracks in the armor. Merab Dvalishvili, he went to a very close fight with Umar. The cracks in the armor are there. Like Alex Pereira, he did lose to Ankalaev. He did lose to Israel Adesanya. There are cracks in the armor. You can make a game plan for them. So eventually, after a certain point, after you've been at the top for so long, you're going to be figured out. And the third reason is a lot of these fighters aren't really underdogs. You look at the Charles Oliveira-Max Holloway fight. How was Charles Oliveira ever an underdog? We have never seen Max Holloway face a grappler before, like a good high-level grappler. And whenever these grapplers that aren't on the same level as Charles Oliveira, I wouldn't say bad grapplers, but definitely clear difference between them and Oliveira. They haven't really, Max hasn't really been able to defend the grappling from them. It didn't make sense that Charles Oliveira was the underdog going into that fight. You look at Aljamain Sterling versus Yusuf Zalal. How was Yusuf Zalal the favorite? It was Aljamain Sterling who was the favorite before, but the closing odds were Yusuf Zalal as the favorite. So they aren't really underdogs. That's why the statistics don't really match well. But this problem isn't really new. It was there in 2024. It was there in 2025. It's there more in 2026, I admit. But it was definitely present in the past years as well. There's also another reason. Reason number 4, aura bias. These fighters have been on the top for so long, and they have so much aura, just plain aura, that we kind of count their opponents out already. It's kind of a stupid reason, but it is definitely a valid reason. Another reason is that if you look at the pattern, you see that these high-level guys are losing to older guys that have been in the sport for much longer than them, that have had more fights than them, that have had more experience than them. And it all ties back to that first point that I said of physicality. These fighters rely on their physicality a lot. And that's why their basics don't develop enough. And when you look at these fighters that are old, and you're like, how are these older fighters winning? It's because the fighters they're fighting, even Volk versus Lopez, for example. Lopez has an iron chin, and he has a lot of power, so he doesn't really develop his basics as good. And these old fighters, they have had time to develop their basics. Their basics are good. They have spent a lot of time in the sport, so they can exploit these weaknesses, these deficiencies in the basics of their opponent's skills. And the fifth and the first point tie back. And there's also another point that all of these things happening at the same time is just really unlucky. I hate to say it, but it really is just a coincidence. And it does happen once in a while. But I will say, when I look back, I go to 2025, I go to 2024, there haven't been a streak of underdogs winning. In title fights, there haven't been a streak of underdogs winning. Since Volkanovski fought Diego Lopez, not a single favorite has won a title fight. That's a very long streak. And that streak might even continue. Such a long streak hasn't been seen since like fucking forever, dude. That's what's really throwing me off. So either this year is just a streaky kind of year where instead of like 2-3 favorites win and then an underdog wins, 2-3 favorite wins, then an underdog wins, we kind of have like underdog, 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 and then favorites win towards the end of the year, which is a very likely possibility. Now there's also another thing that why I say it will be a streaky kind of year, because these underdogs weren't really underdogs. You look at Pyotr, he's not gonna lose this year. More than likely not. Like, he just beat Marab, dude. I don't think there's anyone that beats him. He's beat half of the fucking guys in the rankings already. You look at Volkanovski, he's not losing anytime soon, and he's gonna be the favorite. You look at Justin Gaethje, he's gonna lose. Let's be honest. He's probably going to retire before he loses, and they're probably gonna give him an easy fight. Look at Islam Makhachev. If Ian Gary beats him, Ian Gary's probably not going to lose to anyone at welterweight. You look at middleweight, Sean Strickland. He's already beat half of the middleweights. I don't think he's losing anytime soon. Carlos Ulberg, forget losing. He just isn't even going to fight. You look at Cyril Gahn. You don't, except for Tom Aspinall, I don't think he loses to any other heavyweight. So maybe it's going to be a streaky kind of year, but at the same time, you look at champions like Joshua Van, and you're like, how he won as the underdog, but he's not gonna be the underdog. If he's not the underdog against Pantoja, we might even see another underdog upset. But more than likely, Pantoja will be the favorite, so we might see more favorites winning towards the end of the year rather than it being like a mix. So it will still be kind of the same statistics of around 60 to 65% of favorites winning. But instead of it being like jumbled up and more random, it will be more like a streak kind of thing. It will be more streaky. And that's what my thoughts and opinions were. If you think I said anything wrong in this video, or if you think I missed anything, any reasons as to why this might happen, or anything in the video that you disagree with, leave it in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.